Yesterday, I shared a video on the top 5 openings to play as white if you are a beginner. And if you still haven't seen that video, I'll leave a card up here so you can click and watch it. And today we're going to do the same, but I'm going to flip the board to the black's perspective. So these are the top 5 openings for beginners to play as black. And in case you're new here, I'm Victor and this is What the Fork Chess. Welcome to the channel. I post videos pretty much every day with chess tips for improvement. We just hit the 1,000 subscriber mark, so thank you guys very much. And if you are not subscribed to the channel yet, please hit the subscribe button down below and just watch the videos. So my criteria to make this list was the opening has to be easy to play, so you don't have to memorize thousands of lines and variations. And the opening has to be strong, so it has to be easy and simple to play and a very challenging and strong opening to defend against white's plans. And the first one that we're going to talk about today is the Kokan Defense. And we're going to go for that first because e4 is the most popular move played by white, move 1. So if you check the Lead Chess database, this is the most common move. And one of the most common replies is c6. And why are we playing this move? We play c6 to prepare the advancement here on d5. So we have the pawn supporting it. That's the idea right from the start. And this pawn, when pushed here to d5, is going to be challenging the pawn on e4 that is not defended right now. But your opponent's probably going to just play d4 here and take the center. You play d5, and if they take, you take back. If they don't take, you can do other things because there are many variations here. They can take your pawn, advance, or they can try to defend this pawn with the knight. You just have to study 3 variations, which is not too much, considering other openings that have like thousands of variations. So this one, you're just gonna study those ones. But your idea here is you're basically going to develop your pieces very quickly. You're gonna develop the knight, develop this bishop over here, pinning the knight whenever that's possible. And then you're going to close this pawn chain here in the center. First, you develop the bishop, and then you close the pawn chain with e6, right? So if you play e6 here, you are locking up your bishop, and that's not really good. So that's why we're playing the Kokan and not the French defense, right? So after your opponent keeps developing, you just develop your pieces, close your pawn chain. You can develop your bishop here. If they want to trade, you just take back with your queen. That's all good because you have a piece developed, right? If they don't, you can develop your knight here and castle very quickly, and you have all your pieces deployed. You have the C half open file, semi-open file to attack with your rooks in the future. And you can, of course, go for a minority attack here on the queen side whenever you want to. So this opening is very easy to play because you don't have to memorize a lot of lines. It's very strong against e4, one of the most popular openings even at the grandmaster level. And of course, it's an opening that is solid and good enough for any chess player at any level to play, so that's why it's on the list. Alright, and the second opening that I'm going to talk about is another alternative against e4 because it's the most popular opening. I chose 2 openings to deal with that. And this is the Scandinavian Defense, and it's a really great opening for beginners. It's really good because it's very simple and you don't have to memorize a lot of lines, because your opponent's probably going to go for takes here, and then you just have to know your lines. You can always play this line where you take with the queen, but you might expect your opponent to just attack your queen here, and then you have to retreat it back or just move it to a5. This is completely playable, but what I like playing here is actually developing my knight to f6, attacking this pawn, forcing my opponent to defend it, and then I take it anyway. And as my opponent captures, I take back with the queen, and now there is no knight to harass the queen over here. And you have a much better position than the first one. That's why I choose to play this line more often than not. And from here, your opponent's going to keep developing. You can pin that knight immediately, and as they break the pin, you develop all the queen side first, and you castle queen side in this case. And as you do that, you have all these pieces pointing here down to your opponent's queen, and it's very easy to continue from here. You can push these pawns against white's castle king on the king side, and this is a very simple opening, and your opponents cannot deviate that much because there are not too many alternatives when you play that, right? So against this opening, against the Scandinavian defense, that is not much that white can do. They have to go for your lines, and you're going to be ahead because you already know the lines. And the third opening that I'm going to talk about here, again, it's against e4, because this is such a very popular opening. You should have some weapons against this. And just like the Kokan, we're going to play here the French defense. And this is one of the best openings, not because it's super easy to learn as a beginner. It's a little bit harder, but I highly recommend it because it's super solid. It's hard to find an opening that is so solid as the French defense. So what you're planning to do here is push here e6, so you can play d5 safely, and this pawn is going to be supporting it. We do the same thing in the Kokan, but just pushing c6 first, and then we push d5. So instead of pushing this pawn, we push this pawn, and it's pretty much the same goal. We want to push d5 safely, but here in this case, the only downside is that it's when your opponent plays d4 and you play d5, this bishop is now locked behind the pawn chain, so it's going to be hard to develop this bishop. This is a downside. Every opening has upsides and downsides. You just have to be mindful of them. I talked about this in the previous video, so every opening has flaws. So you just have to be aware of the flaws that are present in your opening, in the opening you play. Your opponent can go for the three most common lines here. Of course, there are more lines, but these are the most common ones, which is taking the pawn, exchange variation, or advancing the pawn, the advanced variation, or they can try to defend this pawn by moving the knight somewhere, which is going to be, they have some different names, classical or tarash, but pretty much they're going to try to hold on to this pawn. But let's say they take the pawn here and you take back, the exchange variation, probably the easiest one to play. This already solved your problem, right? You don't have this pawn blocking the bishop anymore, so this is great for you. That's why the exchange variation is not as bad as people think it is, for black at least. And here you have very easy development. You just develop your pieces, castle very quickly, defend your pawn. You just develop these last two minor pieces and you're great to go. It's very hard to mess up when you're playing black in the French defense, and you have to be mindful of your goals when you're playing a certain opening. If you're playing white, you play for an advantage, and if you're playing black, you play to equalize. So with this position here, you are already equalized move 3. So you already got what you needed, which is basically equalizing the position right at the start. You can just castle your king here and you're very safe. And then it's up to white, right, to prove the advantage here. So the burden is on them. Yes, but your opponent is not going to play e4 all the time, so you gotta have a weapon against d4 or maybe 2. So that's why I'm talking about this opening now. So this is the fourth opening that I recommend for beginners, and against d4, you gotta have something to play against this opening, right? So what I recommend here is the bread and butter. Don't play anything that is very fancy. Just go for a d5 yourself and play like in a Queen's Gambit decline fashion. So no matter very much what your opponent plays here, whether they play like a Queen's Gambit or if they play a London system or anything similar to that, you're pretty much going to go for the same moves here. You're going to reinforce your pawn here, develop your knight and your bishop and castle, and later you can figure out what to do here on the queen side. You can maybe fianchetto your bishop if you want to develop this knight over here and push this pawn. There are many other things that you can do here. And but you first go for these, let's say 5 or 6 moves, setting up a Queen's Gambit declined fashion position. So if your opponent goes for c4, you just reinforce your pawn, develop your knight, develop your bishop here. If they pin your knight, you can just have it here. Maybe you can think about putting your bishop over here. It's not a bad idea as well. You can castle, and let's say your opponent closes the pawn chain here. You can go ahead and think about maybe possibly fianchettoing this bishop here. Be mindful that this bishop is aiming at this pawn, so maybe there are some issues of this knight coming in. So maybe you can play a move like this one to just prevent any infiltrations. There are many other possibilities here, but this structure with the 3 pawns here and the knight, the bishop developed, your king is safe. it's very hard to go wrong with this. Even if your opponent's bishop is here, pinning your knight, you can just push this pawn and kick it away. So it's a very solid opening. It's really hard for white to break through here. Yes, and last but not least, we have this opening right here that I like a lot. And it's a similar theory to one of the openings that we saw in the first video talking about the openings for white, which is the bird's opening. It's just colors reversed, and this is the Dutch defense. It's the favorite opening by Grandmaster Simon Williams, the Ginger GM. So I like this opening because it's very flexible, and you can use this against pretty much anything besides e4. So if your opponent plays like d4 or even c4, and if they play anything else, you can go for the Dutch pretty much all the time. Of course, the only move that they can play is e4, and then you have to play something else, but it works against pretty much anything, so it's extremely flexible, and it's not super easy for beginners, and again, it has its flaws, like I said before, but every opening has its flaws, so it's a great opening because it fights for a win. It's not a drawish opening, so you're creating imbalances right from the start. And it's a great opening to play against other openings like the d4 or c4. If your opponent goes for the English, you can play this. If they go for the birds, you can play it. So it's going to be a very symmetrical game, but you can play that. So it's a great opening to have in your repertoire as well, because you can use the same, pretty much the same theory from the birds opening. You can use it here, and it's pretty much the same, just colors reversed. So your opponent might develop their pieces over there. You're just going to develop your knight, and you're going to have this pawn chain right here. And your idea is to put your bishop here and castle very quickly and then push this pawn. This is the classical Dutch, but you can go for the Stonewall Dutch, or you can go even for what they say it's the Leningrad, if I'm not mistaken. So there are many options here. I just like to develop the bishop over here, or here if I can pin this knight. More often than not, I'm gonna try to trade this knight over here, and I just castle very quickly and push e6, d6, sorry, so I can have this grasp over the center. And it's interesting because this move is probably going to be played in later future. I can always bring my knight over here, or I can start pushing pawns here on the queen side. Another maneuver that is common here is to just bring the queen here to the king side and start an attack against white's king that is probably going to castle next move. So this is another alternative that you have. So guys, if you like this video, please don't forget to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more. I want to know your opinions in the comments as well. So if you agree or disagree with the openings that I put on this list, feel free to comment down below, and also tell me what openings you would consider, I don't know, advising a beginner player to play if they're just starting out in chess. So please leave your opinions in the comments down below, and I see you as always in the next video.